The radio crackled with static at 3:47 hours, cutting through the pre-dawn darkness of forward operating base Sentinel like a blade through silk. Staff Sergeant Marcus Bulldog Rodriguez pressed the headset tighter against his ear, his weathered face creasing into a frown that had become his trademark after 3 tours in Afghanistan. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but carried an undercurrent that made seasoned operators pause mid-breath. Overlord, this is Raptor 7-1. I have eyes on multiple tangos moving toward your position. Count approximately 40 hostiles, armed and advancing through the valley approach. The mysterious transmission had come from an A-10 Thunderbolt II, a flying tank that shouldn't have been in this sector, according to every flight manifest Rodriguez had seen that morning. No scheduled close air support. No friendly aircraft listed in the area of operations. Yet here was someone claiming overwatch, speaking in clipped, precise tones that suggested military training, but with a voice that didn't match any pilot on their roster. Rodriguez exchanged glances with his team leader, Chief Petty Officer Jake Ironside Thompson, whose scarred hands were already reaching for his rifle. The SEAL team had been tracking a high-value target for 72 hours through the Hindu Kush Mountains, following intelligence that placed Taliban Commander Khalil Nazari in a cave complex just 2 clicks from their current position. The mission was supposed to be surgical: get in, capture the target, extract before sunrise. Simple, clean, by the book. But nothing about this felt simple anymore. Raptor 7-1, this is Overlord Actual, Thompson transmitted, his voice betraying none of the confusion rippling through the 12-man team. Confirm your identity and mission authorization. We show no friendly air assets in this sector. Silence stretched across the airways for 15 seconds that felt like hours. The team remained frozen in their concealed positions among the jagged rocks, night vision goggles scanning the valley below where shadows moved like ghosts against the moonlit terrain. Each SEAL could feel the weight of the unknown pressing against their tactical advantage, transforming their carefully planned operation into something far more dangerous. Overlord, I'm not on your manifest because I'm not supposed to be here, the voice finally responded, and for the first time, Rodriguez detected something that made his blood run cold, the slight tremor of someone operating far beyond their authorized parameters. But those tangos down there, they know exactly where you are, and they're moving to cut off your exfil route. You've got maybe 8 minutes before they have you surrounded. The transmission ended, leaving only the sound of wind whistling through the mountain peaks and the sudden, terrible certainty that their mission had just become a fight for survival. Through the darkness above, the distinctive silhouette of an A-10 Warthog carved through the star-filled sky, its pilot unknown, its presence unauthorized, and its intentions completely unclear to the 12 Navy SEALs who suddenly found their lives hanging in the balance of a mystery that had just descended from the heavens like a mechanical angel of war. The temperature had dropped to nearly freezing, but Lieutenant Commander Sarah, Widow Kellerman, felt sweat trickling down her spine inside the cramped cockpit of her Thunderbolt II. The aircraft's call sign, Raptor 7-1, wasn't assigned to any current mission, because technically this mission didn't exist. 3 hours ago, she'd been in her quarters at Bagram Air Base, staring at satellite imagery that showed a massive Taliban force mobilizing toward the exact coordinates where SEAL Team 7 was conducting their capture operation. The intelligence had come through back channels, whispered conversations in shadowy corners of the intelligence community that suggested someone had leaked the SEAL Team's position. Someone wanted Nazari's captors dead, and they'd arranged for overwhelming force to ensure it happened. Standard protocol demanded she report through proper channels, file the appropriate paperwork, and wait for authorization that would come too late to save 12 American lives. Instead, she'd chosen to steal a fully armed A-10 and go rogue. Overlord, this is Raptor 7-1, she transmitted again, banking the aircraft into a wide circle that kept the valley floor in view through her targeting pod. I'm tracking at least 4 separate groups converging on your position from different vectors. They're using radio discipline and moving with tactical precision. This isn't a random patrol, it's a coordinated ambush. Below, she could see the SEAL team's heat signatures through her night vision system. 12 bright spots of body heat scattered among the rocks in a defensive formation that had shifted from assault posture to survival mode in less than 5 minutes. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was trying to save lives by flying an aircraft designed to destroy everything in its path, piloted by someone whose own military career was about to end the moment she landed this bird. If she lived that long. Raptor 7-1, what's your ammunition status? Thompson's voice cut through the static. All business now. Whatever confusion he'd felt about her unauthorized presence had been replaced by the pragmatic acceptance that help was help, regardless of where it came from. Kellerman glanced at her weapons display, knowing the numbers by heart but checking anyway. 200 rounds of 30 Mike, 6 AGM-65 Mavericks, and a full complement of 2.75 rockets, enough to make some people very unhappy. Copy that. Can you identify the threat composition? She switched to her thermal imaging and began a methodical scan of the approaching forces, her trained eye picking out details that would determine how the next hour played out. RPGs, PKM machine guns, what looked like at least 2 mortar teams setting up on the ridgelines. Professional fighters with professional equipment, moving with the kind of coordination that suggested extensive training and excellent intelligence about their targets. Overlord, you're looking at company-strength opposition, mixed small arms and heavy weapons. They know your escape routes, they know your timeline, and they're positioning to deny you any chance of extraction. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. Someone sold you out. The silence that followed spoke volumes about trust, betrayal, and the bitter mathematics of warfare where information was currency and American lives were acceptable losses in larger games played by men who never heard the screams. Chief Thompson's voice came back harder than before. Raptor 7-1, whoever you are, I need to know right now, are you here to help us, or are you part of the problem? Kellerman stared down at the valley where 12 Americans waited for her answer, knowing that everything she said next would determine whether she was remembered as a hero who broke regulations to save lives, or a rogue pilot whose unauthorized actions got good soldiers killed. The weight of command, even unofficial command, settled on her shoulders like a familiar burden she'd carried through 3 combat tours and 17 confirmed kills. Overlord, she said finally, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, I'm here to bring you home. The first Taliban fighters appeared on the ridgeline exactly 8 minutes later, silhouetted against the starlight like deadly shadows emerging from the earth itself. Rodriguez watched through his scope as they moved with practiced efficiency, establishing firing positions that would turn the valley floor into a killing field. His count reached 23 before he stopped counting and started calculating angles of escape that didn't exist. Contact north, approximately 400 meters, he whispered into his radio, the words carrying the weight of a death sentence. Multiple hostiles establishing overwatch positions. Similar reports began flooding the team frequency as other SEALs identified threats from every direction, except the steep cliff face behind them. A wall of rock that offered protection from gunfire, but also eliminated any possibility of retreat. They were trapped in a natural amphitheater with enemy fighters taking positions in the seats above them, preparing for a show that would end with American blood soaking into Afghan soil. All stations, this is Overlord Actual. Thompson's voice remained steady, but Rodriguez could hear the undercurrent of a man calculating impossible odds. We're going to need that close air support sooner rather than later, Raptor 7-1. High above, Kellerman had already begun her attack run, the A-10's twin General Electric turbofan engines spooling up to combat power as she lined up on the northern ridgeline, where the largest concentration of enemy fighters had gathered. The aircraft responded to her touch like a familiar lover, every vibration and sound telling her stories about airspeed, altitude, and the deadly mathematics of controlled violence. Overlord, Raptor 7-1 is inbound from the northwest, danger close. Mark your positions with strobes and keep your heads down. She could see the tiny flickers of infrared strobes as the SEAL team marked their location, 12 points of light in an ocean of darkness that represented the difference between surgical precision and catastrophic friendly fire. The margin for error was measured in meters, the consequence of mistake measured in American lives. The A-10's nose began to glow as she armed the GAU-8 Avenger cannon, a 7-barrel rotary cannon capable of firing 3,900 rounds per minute of 30 depleted uranium shells. Each round was designed to penetrate tank armor. Against human targets, they would create devastation that bordered on the supernatural. But precision was everything. Too high, and she'd miss the enemy entirely. Too low, and she'd turn her allies into pink mist. "Guns, guns, guns," she transmitted, squeezing the trigger and feeling the entire aircraft shudder as the cannon came alive with mechanical fury. The sound reached the SEALs 3 seconds later, a distinctive buzzing roar that every ground soldier recognized as the voice of salvation or doom, depending on which side of the targeting reticle they occupied. The northern ridge line erupted in dirt, rock, and worse things, as 30-millimeter rounds chewed through fighting positions like a chainsaw through paper. But even as the first enemy position disintegrated under her guns, Kellerman could see muzzle flashes from 3 other locations, the coordinated ambush adapting to her presence with disturbing tactical flexibility. The radio exploded with traffic as the trapped SEALs engaged targets on multiple vectors, their disciplined fire contrasting sharply with the wild spray of automatic weapons from fighters who had expected an easy slaughter and found themselves in a genuine firefight instead. "Raptor 7-1, we've got mortars incoming." Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos as the distinctive whistle of falling shells began to echo off the valley walls. "They're bracketing our position." Kellerman pulled out of her gun run and immediately began scanning for the mortar positions, knowing that indirect fire would kill the SEAL team as surely as direct assault, but with far less risk to the attackers. Through her targeting pod, she could see the telltale heat signatures of mortar tubes on the eastern ridge, crew-served weapons that could drop high-explosive shells directly onto the Americans regardless of their cover. The first mortar round impacted 30 meters from the SEAL position, close enough to shower them with rock fragments and remind everyone that time was running out in the most literal sense possible. The second round hit 20 meters closer, and the third would likely land directly among the Americans unless someone did something dramatic in the next 60 seconds. "Overlord, I'm going to need you to paint those mortar positions with laser," Kellerman transmitted, already selecting a Maverick missile from her weapons inventory. "I've got Hellfires that can reach out and touch someone, but I need accurate targeting data." Thompson's response was immediate. "Stand by for sparkle." The laser designator painted an invisible line from the SEAL position to the enemy mortar crew, a beam of coherent light that would guide the AGM-65 Maverick missile with surgical precision. Kellerman watched the targeting data populate on her heads-up display, confirming lock-on and calculating intercept vectors that would put 65 kilograms of high explosive exactly where it needed to be. "Rifle," she announced, triggering the missile and watching it streak away from her aircraft like a man-made meteor, carrying the concentrated fury of American military technology toward men who had made the mistake of threatening her countrymen. The explosion was visible from space, a brilliant flash that temporarily turned night into day across several square kilometers of Afghan mountainside. When the light faded and the smoke cleared, the mortar position had simply ceased to exist, replaced by a crater that would serve as a permanent reminder of the cost of underestimating American resolve. But the celebration was short-lived. Even as the debris from the destroyed mortar position was still falling, Rodriguez spotted new movement on the southern approach. More fighters, more weapons, More evidence that this ambush had been planned with the kind of resources and intelligence that suggested involvement from someone far more sophisticated than local Taliban commanders. "Contact south, heavy weapons," he reported, watching through his scope as what appeared to be a recoilless rifle team set up in a position that would give them direct fire capability into the sealed defensive perimeter. "They're bringing up anti-tank weapons." The tactical situation was deteriorating faster than solutions could be implemented. For every enemy position Kellerman destroyed from the air, two more seemed to appear from concealment, as if the mountains themselves were generating an endless supply of fighters determined to kill the Americans trapped in their midst. It was becoming clear that this wasn't just an ambush. It was a carefully orchestrated attempt to capture or kill an entire SEAL team, probably for propaganda purposes that would be worth far more than the tactical value of eliminating 12 operators. Raptor 7-1, how much ammunition do you have left? Thompson's question carried the weight of a man doing math that didn't add up to survival. Kellerman checked her weapons display again, subtracting the rounds she'd already expended and calculating how many targets she could realistically engage before becoming a very expensive observer platform. "Enough for maybe 6 more gun runs, 3 missiles, and whatever miracles I can pull out of my flight suit." "Copy that. We're going to try to move to a better position, but we'll need continuous air support to have any chance of reaching the extraction point." The extraction point was 2 kilometers away across terrain that offered minimal cover and maximum exposure to the growing number of enemy positions. Under normal circumstances, it would be a manageable movement for a SEAL team. But these weren't normal circumstances, and the number of variables working against them was growing by the minute. As if summoned by her thoughts, the radio crackled with a new voice, older, more authoritative, speaking with the kind of calm that came from decades of military experience and the absolute certainty of command authority. "All stations, this is Mustang 6-6. Inbound your location with additional air support and extraction assets. Raptor 7-1, identify yourself immediately." Kellerman felt her heart skip as she recognized the call sign of Colonel James "Hammer" Harrison, her former squadron commander, and the man who would probably court-martial her the moment she landed, assuming she lived long enough for legal proceedings to matter. The game had just changed again, but whether for better or worse remained to be seen. Colonel Harrison's voice cut through the radio chatter like a command blade, carrying 30 years of military authority and barely controlled fury. "Raptor 7-1, you will identify yourself immediately or I will have you shot down as a hostile aircraft. This is your only warning." Kellerman stared at her radio controls, knowing that her next transmission would either save her career or end it permanently. Through her canopy, she could see the lights of additional aircraft approaching from the east, probably the rapid response package that someone had finally authorized once word reached the right desks that a SEAL team was in trouble. Help was coming, but it might arrive too late for the Americans currently trading gunfire with an enemy force that seemed to grow larger every minute. "Mustang 6-6, this is Captain Kellerman, call sign Widow, flying unauthorized close air support mission to prevent the massacre of American personnel." She paused, watching tracer fire arc across the valley floor like deadly fireworks. "Sir, with respect, you can court-martial me after we get these boys home." The silence that followed lasted exactly 12 seconds. She counted them on her chronometer while maintaining her orbit above the battle and trying to identify priority targets for her remaining ordnance. 12 seconds during which her entire military career hung in the balance, along with the lives of the SEALs who were depending on her unauthorized intervention to keep breathing. "Jesus Christ, Kellerman," Harrison's voice came back, and she could hear something that might have been admiration mixed with the expected anger. "You always did have more balls than brains. What's your assessment of the tactical situation?" "Sir, we're looking at approximately 60 enemy fighters with heavy weapons, coordinated fire, and intelligence about SEAL team positions that suggests inside information. This was a trap, and we walked right into it. She rolled into another attack run, lining up on machine gun positions that were laying down suppressive fire to keep the Americans pinned, while other fighters maneuvered for better angles. I've degraded their capability significantly, but they keep bringing up reinforcements from covered positions. Copy that. I've got 2 additional A-10s and a package of Marines inbound for extraction, ETA 15 minutes. Can you keep those SEALs alive that long? Kellerman looked at her ammunition display, then at the multiple enemy positions still visible on her targeting systems, then at the small cluster of heat signatures representing 12 Americans who were rapidly running out of options. The mathematics were brutally simple. She had enough ordnance for maybe 10 more minutes of effective close air support, and the enemy had enough fighters to maintain pressure for at least 30 minutes. Sir, I'll keep them alive or die trying. Negative, Captain. You'll keep them alive and stay alive yourself. That's an order. Harrison's voice carried the kind of authority that had sent men into battle for centuries. We don't leave anyone behind, and that includes maverick pilots who steal aircraft to play hero. She couldn't help smiling despite the circumstances. Roger that, Mustang 6-6, Raptor 7-1 continuing close air support. Below her, the SEALs had managed to consolidate their position and establish better fields of fire, but they were still vastly outnumbered and running low on ammunition. Rodriguez watched through his scope as enemy fighters attempted to flank their position using a dried streambed that offered concealment from direct observation. Standard infantry tactics, executed with the kind of precision that suggested formal military training rather than guerrilla improvisation. Raptor 7-1, we've got movement in the Wadi, approximately 200 meters southeast of our position, he transmitted, painting the area with his laser designator. Multiple hostiles using the streambed for concealment. Kellerman acquired the target and began her attack run, but as she lined up for the gun pass, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The fighters in the streambed weren't just using cover. They were wearing body armor, carrying modern weapons, and moving with the kind of tactical coordination that belonged to special operations units, not Taliban irregulars. Overlord, be advised, these aren't typical Taliban fighters. Equipment and tactics suggest possible foreign training or advisors. She squeezed the trigger and watched her cannon rounds chew up the streambed, but several of the figures managed to reach better cover before the destructive fire could reach them. Someone invested serious resources in this operation. The implications were staggering. If foreign military advisors were involved in targeting American Special Operations Forces, it suggested a level of escalation that could have strategic consequences far beyond the current tactical situation. But those were problems for people with more stars on their shoulders than she had. Her job was to keep 12 SEALs alive long enough for the cavalry to arrive. A new voice crackled over the radio, young and strained with the kind of fear that came from being shot at by people who wanted you dead. This is Ranger 2-3, taking heavy fire from multiple directions. We're running low on ammunition and need immediate resupply or extraction. Kellerman felt her heart sink as she realized that the situation had just become even more complicated. There was another American unit in the area, also under attack, also in desperate need of air support that she couldn't provide to everyone simultaneously. The mathematics of combat had just become impossible. Thompson's voice cut through her tactical calculations with the calm professionalism of a man who had faced impossible odds before and lived to tell about it. Raptor 7-1, we can hear Ranger 2-3's firefight approximately 1 click north of our position. How many aircraft do you have available for close air support? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Kellerman was one pilot in one aircraft, trying to provide close air support for at least 2 separate American units under attack by a coordinated enemy force that seemed to have unlimited resources and excellent intelligence. Even if she had been operating with full authorization and unlimited ammunition, the tactical problem would have been challenging. As a lone wolf flying a stolen aircraft with rapidly diminishing ordnance, it was approaching impossible. Overlord, I'm the only air support available until Mustang 66 arrives with additional assets, she admitted, the words tasting like defeat even as she spoke them. I can't be in two places at once. Understood. Prioritize the Rangers. They sound like they're in immediate danger of being overrun. Kellerman felt a stab of admiration for Thompson's leadership, putting another unit's survival ahead of his own team's tactical advantage. It was the kind of decision that separated real warriors from soldiers who just wore the uniform, and it reminded her why she'd risked everything to help these men in the first place. Copy that, Overlord, moving to support Ranger 2-3. She banked toward the sound of gunfire echoing from the northern valley, already calculating attack angles and ammunition expenditure rates. I'll be back as soon as I can. As she flew toward the second firefight, Kellerman couldn't shake the feeling that events were spiraling beyond anyone's ability to control them. What had started as a simple capture mission had become a complex battle involving multiple American units, sophisticated enemy forces, and tactical challenges that seemed designed to maximize American casualties. Someone had planned this very carefully, and that someone understood American military procedures well enough to turn them into vulnerabilities. Through her canopy, she could see muzzle flashes from both American and enemy positions, tiny sparkles of light that represented the difference between life and death for soldiers she'd never met, but had sworn to protect. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like armor made of lead, heavy with the knowledge that her next few decisions would determine how many Americans went home alive. The Rangers were dug in behind a cluster of boulders that provided decent cover from small arms fire, but no protection from the mortar rounds that were beginning to fall around their position with disturbing accuracy. Kellerman could see the smoke and dust from recent impacts, evidence that the enemy had their range and was adjusting fire to bracket the American position. Ranger 2-3, this is Raptor 7-1 providing close air support. What's your tactical situation? The response came immediately, breathless with the kind of urgency that meant someone was about to die if help didn't arrive in the next few minutes. Raptor 7-1, we've got approximately 30 hostiles with machine guns and mortars, closing from 3 directions. We've taken 2 casualties and are down to our last magazines. If you can't thin them out, we're going to be overrun in the next 10 minutes. Kellerman scanned the area with her targeting pod, identifying enemy positions and calculating the most efficient use of her remaining ordnance. The Rangers were in a slightly better defensive position than the SEALs, but they were also facing a smaller, more concentrated enemy force that was preparing for a final assault that would overwhelm the American position through sheer weight of numbers. Copy that, Ranger 2-3. I'm going to work the northern approach first, then shift to the eastern positions. Keep your heads down and mark your position with strobes. She began her attack run, lining up on a machine gun nest that was providing suppressive fire to cover the enemy advance. The familiar weight of the trigger under her finger felt like holding the power of life and death, which in many ways it was. Each round she fired was a deliberate decision about who lived and who died, choices that would echo in her memory long after the smoke cleared and the casualties were counted. Guns, 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 she announced, and once again the A-10's cannon spoke with mechanical fury, chewing through enemy positions with the kind of precision that only came from years of training and natural talent refined by combat experience. The machine gun nest disappeared in a cloud of dust and debris, along with the 3 fighters who had been operating it. But even as she pulled out of the gun run, Kellerman could see new problems developing. The enemy wasn't just adapting to her presence, they were actively trying to shoot her down. Tracer fire was arcing up from multiple positions, creating a web of deadly light that was designed to knock her out of the sky and eliminate the only thing standing between American ground forces and a massacre. One of the tracers passed close enough to her canopy that she could see the glowing projectile streak by like a malevolent star. If her aircraft was hit and disabled, both the SEALs and the Rangers would be left to face overwhelming odds without air support, and Colonel Harrison's rescue package would arrive to find nothing but American bodies scattered across Afghan mountainsides. She keyed her radio, transmitting on the emergency frequency that would reach every American aircraft within range. Any station, this is Raptor 7-1 with troops in contact, multiple locations, requesting immediate close air support and medical evacuation. We have American personnel in danger of being overrun. The response came from an unexpected source, a voice she recognized as belonging to Major Lisa Phoenix Chang, one of the best combat pilots in the squadron and someone who had never liked Kellerman's tendency to bend regulations when lives were on the line. Raptor 7-1, this is Phoenix 2-1. Inbound your location with a full weapons load and a bad attitude. What's your ammunition status? For the first time in hours, Kellerman felt something that might have been hope. Phoenix 2-1, I'm down to about 60 rounds of 30 Mike and 2 missiles. I've got Rangers in immediate danger of being overrun and SEALs trapped in a separate location about 1 click south. Copy that. I'll take the Rangers, you continue supporting the SEALs. And Kellerman. Chang's voice carried a note of something that sounded almost like respect. Nice work out here. Stupid, unauthorized, and completely against regulations, but nice work. High above the chaos of the ground battle, 2 A-10 Thunderbolt aircraft carved through the darkness like mechanical predators, their pilots linked by radio communications, and a shared understanding that American lives depended on their ability to coordinate precision violence against an enemy that had made the mistake of targeting the wrong soldiers on the wrong night. The arrival of reinforcements had shifted the tactical balance, but the fundamental problem remained unchanged. There were still too many enemies, too few Americans, and too many variables that could turn salvation into catastrophe with a single mistake. Kellerman banked back toward the SEAL position, her ammunition counter showing numbers that wouldn't have been adequate for a training exercise, much less a real combat situation against a determined enemy force. But mathematics had never been her strong suit anyway. She preferred the kind of problem-solving that involved putting ordnance on target and keeping American soldiers alive long enough to see another sunrise. Overlord, this is Raptor 7-1 returning to your location with additional air support inbound. What's your current status? Thompson's response carried the strain of a man who had been fighting for his life and the lives of his team for over an hour. We've consolidated our position and established better fields of fire, but we're still taking contact from multiple directions. Ammunition is getting low, and we've got one man with a leg wound that needs medical attention. The mention of casualties made everything more urgent. Wounded soldiers couldn't move as quickly, couldn't fight as effectively, and needed medical evacuation that wasn't available until the tactical situation was stabilized. It was another variable in an equation that was already too complex, another factor that could tip the balance between mission success and catastrophic failure. Copy that, Overlord. Help is on the way. She keyed a different frequency, reaching out to Colonel Harrison's command aircraft. Mustang 6-6, this is Raptor 7-1. Ground forces report 1 casualty requiring medical evacuation. What's the ETA on your extraction package? Harrison's response was immediate and professional, carrying the kind of authority that came from making life-and-death decisions for other people's children. Raptor 7-1, extraction assets are inbound, ETA 8 minutes. Can you maintain air support until then? 8 minutes. Kellerman looked at her ammunition display, calculated firing rates and target priorities, and came up with mathematics that barely added up to survival. She had maybe 3 more gun runs worth of ammunition, assuming perfect accuracy and no mechanical problems with an aircraft that had already been pushed far beyond normal operational parameters. Affirmative, Mustang 6-6. I'll keep them covered. What she didn't say was that she'd keep them covered even if it meant flying her aircraft directly into enemy positions, turning the A-10 itself into a guided missile weighing 16,000 pounds and carrying enough fuel to create a very impressive explosion. It wouldn't be the first time an American pilot had made that choice, and if circumstances required it, it wouldn't be the last. Below her, the SEALs were preparing for what might be their final stand, checking ammunition, redistributing medical supplies, and saying the kinds of prayers that soldiers had whispered in desperate moments since warfare began. They were professionals, trained for exactly this kind of situation, but training could only take you so far when the enemy had overwhelming advantages in numbers, position, and firepower. Rodriguez watched through his scope as enemy fighters began massing for what looked like a coordinated assault from multiple directions. They had learned from their earlier encounters with American air power, using covered approaches and timing their movements to minimize exposure to aircraft weapons. It was tactically sound, professionally executed, and absolutely terrifying from the perspective of 12 Americans who were rapidly running out of options. Contact front, heavy movement, looks like they're preparing for a final push, he reported, his voice steady despite the circumstances. Multiple groups converging on our position from covered approaches. The enemy had been patient, methodical, and professional in their approach to what they probably saw as an opportunity to inflict significant casualties on American Special Operations Forces. They had taken losses, adapted their tactics, and continued to press their attack with the kind of determination that suggested this operation was worth significant investment in blood and resources. But they had made one critical miscalculation. They had underestimated the lengths to which Americans would go to protect their own. Kellerman lined up for what might be her final gun run, selecting targets with the cold precision of a surgeon removing cancer. Each enemy position represented a threat to American lives, and she had exactly enough ammunition to address the most dangerous threats if her accuracy was perfect, and her luck held for just a few more minutes. Overlord, Raptor 7-1 inbound from the west, danger close. Keep your heads down and trust me to thread the needle. Copy that, Raptor 7-1, we trust you. 3 words that carried the weight of absolute faith from warriors who had placed their lives in the hands of a pilot they had never met, flying an unauthorized mission in a stolen aircraft, with ammunition that wouldn't last long enough to solve their tactical problems through conventional means. It was the kind of trust that defined the American military at its best, professionals relying on professionals, regardless of rank, service branch, or the bureaucratic complications that would need to be sorted out later. If there was a later. The final enemy assault began just as Colonel Harrison's rescue helicopters appeared on the horizon, their rotor noise mixing with the sound of gunfire to create a symphony of salvation and violence that would echo in the memories of everyone who survived the next few minutes. The timing was perfect from a tactical perspective and absolutely terrifying from a human one. Help was close enough to see, but not close enough to matter if the enemy overwhelmed the American defensive positions in the next few minutes. Kellerman squeezed the trigger and felt her aircraft shudder as the last of her cannon ammunition cycled through the GAU-8A Avenger, each round precisely placed to disrupt enemy assault formations and buy the SEALs a few more precious seconds of survival. The enemy attack faltered as key positions were eliminated, but it didn't stop. There were too many fighters, too much invested in this operation, too much at stake for them to withdraw when victory was so close. Raptor 7-1, Winchester on guns, she reported, using the code word that meant she was out of cannon ammunition. I still have 2 missiles, but after that, I'm just expensive moral support. Thompson's response carried grim humor despite the circumstances. Roger that. Expensive moral support is better than no moral support. The enemy fighters resumed their assault, moving with renewed urgency as they realized the devastating air support that had been shredding their ranks was nearly exhausted. Machine gun fire raked the SEAL position, forcing the Americans to stay low behind cover that was becoming increasingly inadequate as enemy shooters found better angles and longer ranges. Rodriguez felt a bullet crack past his helmet, close enough that he could feel the displaced air against his cheek. The enemy was getting closer, their fire more accurate, their assault more coordinated. In another few minutes, they would be close enough to use grenades and small arms fire to finish what mortars and machine guns had started. "Contact, contact, contact," he shouted as muzzle flashes appeared from multiple positions simultaneously. The final enemy push beginning with overwhelming firepower designed to suppress American defensive fire and allow assault teams to close the distance. "They're coming from everywhere." Kellerman armed her last two AGM-65 Maverick missiles, selecting targets that would have the maximum impact on enemy assault capability. The missiles were designed to destroy tanks and hardened positions, but they would work just as well against concentrated infantry formations that had made the mistake of bunching up for their final attack. "Rifle, rifle," she announced, triggering both missiles in rapid succession and watching them streak toward enemy positions like man-made lightning carrying the concentrated fury of American military technology. The explosions were visible from orbit, twin blasts of light and destruction that temporarily turned the Afghan mountainside into something resembling the surface of an alien planet. When the smoke cleared, the enemy assault had been broken, scattered, and reduced to isolated fighters who were more interested in survival than victory. The coordinated attack had become a disorganized retreat, with surviving enemy personnel seeking escape routes rather than assault positions. But the tactical situation was still precarious. Kellerman was now completely out of ordnance, the SEALs were low on ammunition, and there were still enemy fighters in the area who might regroup for another attack if given the opportunity. The rescue helicopters were approaching, but they would be vulnerable during the extraction process, requiring air cover that she could no longer provide. Phoenix 2-1, this is Raptor 7-1, Winchester on.